So, welcome again and continuing from the last lecture, the enigmas of child mental health. This is a common term which you all would have heard called dyslexia, and it has very popular now after that good film made by Mr. Amir Khan. You all know the film called Tare Zameen Pe. It was about, it actually, this term was popularized and it helped us a lot in identifying and motivating people. So, life has become slightly easier. When I find it difficult to explain to parents about what misery the child is undergoing, I refer them to Tare Zameen Pe. Although it had its own fictionalized version, but nevertheless it still gives you some basic information. Dyslexia is a part of a group of disorders called specific learning disabilities or learning disorders or learning disabilities, which, so I will just try to give you a glimpse of all that by talking about dyslexia. It simply means, in the simplest language, is that a normally intelligent kid who is not deprived because of the environment, not deprived or disabled because of hearing or vision impairments, is normally intelligent, is not mentally retarded, finds it difficult to read in the simplest term. Similar kids who find it difficult to write is called dysgraphia, difficulty in writing, dyscalculia, difficulty in calculating, problems with coordination. Now, none of these exist in isolation, although they may exist in isolation, but now this is a illness or a creation of the teaching. So, whether this is a problem of the mind, the brain, or it is environmentally induced because of the teaching styles, is something which we still do not know. But the misery is sure for there, because it is estimated that 1 out of 10 kids in all classrooms across the world have different combination of dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. But before that, let us talk about the learning process. How do we learn? We have talked about how the brain grows. What exactly goes on? So, there is an input, there is a reception, there is a processing, there is a memory, recall and output. So, this is what goes in the classroom. You are being taught, you receive, you process the information, memorize it, recall it when you are being asked, and output. So, the problem can be, and depending on the skills and depending on the mastery which kids do, students in a class are rated from excellent to good, average, below average, and not up to the class standard. Now, 1 out of 10 kids who are not up to the class standards may have learning disability. So, what is exactly happening? Let us look at this slide again. The kids, the input is there for all kids. There is a problem in reception and processing with the kids who cannot read. Obviously, the information which goes in is deficient, has gaps. So, there is a deficiency in memory, there is a deficiency in recall because the information is not there, and there is a deficient output because they may have a difficulty in writing. And this I am talking, when I am talking of dyslexia, I am talking of difficulty in reading the word. So, we know that what we get input is from vision, from hearing, especially in classroom. They do not teach you by touching and smell and all that. So, we are talking about audio visual. Now, some of these kids may be very good by when they take an input through the auditory means. So, when things are read to them, when they read it aloud, they may remember it. So, this process of reception and processing and retention and recall will be all right through the auditory route. The moment it is turned into visual, there is a problem in processing, retention and obviously in writing. So, the problem in dyslexia often exists with dysgraphia. They see the word does not form a pattern, or it is a broken pattern or a different pattern, all the type of disturbances I will show you. And then when they reproduce, they write it what they see, what has gone into the brain. But same may not be true when they give the answer through the oral route, because that circuit of learning is intact. There may be another illness where this circuit may be impaired, but not in dyslexia. So, reading is a painful task. It extinguishes the light from the eyes, it bends the back, it crushes the viscera and the ribs, it brings forth pain to kidneys and weariness to the whole body. This is a 13th century Florentine monk. I am sure this is the feeling of a dyslexic child or an adult. Reading is difficult. 20% of UK and US adults cannot find the word plumber in the yellow pages. Difficulty learning to read is one of the greatest causes of individual and family misery. Lot of misery grows around because the school system is such that it always hell bent on report card without looking at the individual's capabilities. So, once a kid continues to perform badly, he hears lot of ridicule, rebuke from the teachers, the pressure, which can lead to lot of externalizing or internalizing the stress. We will talk about this externalizing and internalizing later on. The stress, continuous stress, either leads to kids to have loss of self confidence, depression, they are not able to express their stress, nobody understands, or things like alcoholism, drug addiction, suicide, antisocial behavior, which is again bringing out the turning the stress which is inside to outside. 3/4 of the prisoners in a gaol are illiterate, half are dyslexic. So, you can see the misery. Commonest cause of disability in university student. It is difficult because it requires rapid visual identification of letter, even in experienced good readers. So, when the teacher is writing on the board, you have to really, we all have experienced the pain of it. The rapid sequencing of the order, the translation into the sounds they stand for. Now, all the teaching in the lower classes is phonetics, you are being taught through the ear, and suddenly this whole thing shifts to writing in say class 1 or 2. So, we do not diagnose dyslexia or learning disability before 7 years of age, because till that time we know that while developing lot of these writing difficulties and aberrations are there, but this is the basic problem. These are the processes which dyslexic find it to do. So, you can read it, even if it is written in a haphazard manner, jumbled of words. A disorder manifested by difficulties in learning to read, and what is this? You read it yourself. Despite conventional instruction, adequate technology and socio-cultural opportunity, the World Federation of Neurology, right? That is dyslexia. This is a discrepancy in intelligence and language disability, a disorder. Your brain read it correctly because if you do not have dyslexia, despite conventional instruction, adequate intelligence, social, as I said, they should not be deprived of socio-cultural thing. They may be, they must be having adequate intelligence, normal intelligence in fact. Conventional instruction, they should have an opportunity in the school. There is a marked difference between the students' recognized potential or intelligence. Everybody says he is intelligent, but he is not studying. Once or twice because of emotional upset in somebody who is actually doing otherwise normally should not make them a dyslexic, but a consistent performance. We can rule out difficulties due to mental retardation, visual or hearing handicap, lack of opportunity, inadequate schooling. So, if you bring a kid from a very poor background who has never been into an English speaking or French speaking class, and if the kid is not able to do it for 4 or 5 months, you do not call it dyslexia, it is a lack of exposure. A dyslexia is when a kid who has equal opportunity is not able to do it. And common complaint, the child is inattentive in classrooms. We all know such kids actually, if you just go through it. Disturbs, does not write, does not complete his homework, does not copy from the blackboard, does not participate in group activities, seems lost, marks are poor, in particular we need to repeat a class, consider showing the child to a doctor, just some of them. Mothers, parents are really hell bent on report cards. I do not know, it is a fear of the system, or at least in a country like India, it may be a fear of the job security and skill sets. And so, child has to be forced to study, takes too much time in some subjects, he does better at home, but this is a very, very common thing. But probably what happens, what our experience tells us, he does better at home because he is not writing at home. Normally, if you remember your childhood, you would be asked to remember questions and mother and father would ask it and you would rattle it off verbally. So, if somebody asks them orally in the classroom, they would perform better. Easy distractions, temper tantrums. Now, these are behavioral problems which are arising. Imagine a kid is trying to overcome this weakness, always trying to make mothers and teachers happy, but the poor kid is unable to read, is unable to write through the visual route. The schools shift from phonetics and the oral route to writing, and that is the age of 6, 7. So, we do not, and we know a lot of developmental time these similar symptoms happen. So, we do not diagnose in early kids, all kids substitute D for B or C for E and or draw it upside down, lot of all of us have done it, but as we grow by 6, 7 we are able to more or less form the word correctly. So, the whole thing may come up in front because of the attentional problem, because problems in reading, writing, as I said, mathematical operation, perception, memorizing, motor skills. What imaging has told us, imaging has really helped us in establishing that dyslexia may be a illness and their brain circuitry may be different in these kids. Otherwise, no one would have believed, the school system would not have believed us, they would have just said that we are all trying to save these kids from hard work and labor and these kids are just bad kids who do not study. But before labeling them, we have solid proof. If you look at in the word recognition, these are the areas which get activated. You see a word here, it is memorized here, you write from here, and these are the area which makes the process. In a dyslexic kid, lot of this process, see this processing area, the visual and comprehend, everything is, so they can write, but they cannot write it correctly because of the lack of the problem in these areas. Poor speed of writing, spelling mistakes, reverse letter, BD, poor letter formation, poor handwriting, miss outs, problems in copying. So, a dyslexic kid may actually write like this. Once upon a time, you may write time, TAIM, saw. So, they are being replaced, substituted for each other. Problems in maths, understanding concepts like more or less, longer, smaller, heavier, lighter, learning basic number facts, difficulty with the vocabulary of mathematics. There is difficulty with multiple tasks, confusion in mathematical operation. The common things we know people who are, when a child is disinterested, refuses to read, common symptoms are poor pronunciation, misarticulation, substitution, omission, repetition. They may substitute one word, one letter with something else, or they may omit one word or repeat something. Basic sight words, like some words which we see and we know it. Whole word approach, their mind does not approach the reading as a whole word, it will split into letters and that is where the confusion arises. Word by word reading is difficult, punctuation errors, confusion between letters and sound, comprehension difficulties, retention difficulties. Occasional presence of the symptom does not mean a problem, as I said about all problems in kids. Only regular presence of symptoms increasing gradually and decreasing performance may indicate a problem. Now, one fallen report card does not mean anything. So, what is important is early identification. How do you early identify? A small kid, as I said, you do not diagnose it before 7 to 9 years of age. Average diagnosis is between 7 to 9 years, but by the time kid comes to us, 7 years would have passed, 6 or 7 years. If you remember in the first slide, I said 9 years lapse before kid comes. Somebody is in class 9th and then they will come and is not performing and board exams is there. But early identification is very important, but not too early. So, the kids problem has to be identified first in the school and by parents and they should be trained in it. Counseling of parents is very important and teachers. We do a lot of workshops to train teachers in doing dyslexia, which is very important. All psychiatrists and pediatricians are the one who see these kids before anybody sees them. They are brought there, he is not concentrating, he is very hyperactive, and so nobody would have checked with the kid that what exactly is the problem. So, if you ask these kids, they may, lot of their behavioral problems may be a secondary layer on the basic core problem of not being able to read and write, which is the basic job of the kid. So, how do you do it? Simplest thing, if you suspect that a kid is persistently not studying right from lower classes, is to take history. Any teacher or parents would know the kid throughout, and a teacher can go back and ask the teacher of the previous classes. If it is consistent, simplest thing is to give the child a task to read and write of his age level. If it does not perform, go one level below, go 2 levels below. Roughly 2 levels below, not being able to read can be dyslexia. Like suppose the normal classes, class 3, 4th when it comes up, if the kid cannot read class 2 or one thing properly, then it is dyslexia or cannot write it. Remediation we will talk about. Class adjustment obviously is a secondary behavioral problem. Now, instead of creating misery, one should accept these kids. As we have accepted autism is different, these kids may not have maybe very strong in reading and writing, but they are normal kids. They are normally intelligent, so they may have some other skill. These kids can be good in music, these kids can be good in sports, these kids can be good in painting or computers. Some of these kids cannot read small font, some of these kids cannot write it fast. So, one cannot snatch the right of living a life of dignity just because you cannot read and write. This is the first set of counseling which has to go to the parents, and you as a doctor or non-doctor should know this, that parents should be told that if you, okay, we will help them with their deficit, but first know their deficit. You can't ask a person who does not have an arm to pick up without giving him an artificial arm. But at the same time, it is about all the problems of the kids, even if it is an illness. One has to, as we talked about autism for optimizing their independent living, we have to tell them that, see, there are so many type of works within the world, anybody can excel in the area where one is meant to. So, we should help this kid in simultaneously discovering their special skills and developing those areas. I am sure a lot of filmmakers and painters and people who think visually, a lot of these kids think visually. They have their professions where these things will be required, cinematography, photography, painting. Parents are insecure, they think only report cards will take them somewhere, but studying and making an academic career, how many people make academic career we know, or studying will fetch you a job, and it is one way of living. There are different forms of art and sports and social and humanitarian where people can make their living, even if they do not know how to read and write well, because there are other skills, there are interpersonal skills, there are intrapersonal skills, there is a music skill, there is a kinesthetic skill. Those skills should be encouraged, because once kids find their mooring in that, once they are confident in that, then these kids get confidence, they are not rebuked, they are not ridiculed, then they can posit themselves and their identity against the kids who are studying. So, somebody may be good in studying, somebody may be good in music. So, somebody is good in music and has dyslexia, he should be appreciated as being a good musician, even if he is average in studies, because all the kids who study do not become toppers. So, what about them? They are good for nothing, they may be having their own skill. So, this mindset of the education system has to change, and this is not about parents or teachers, it is the whole mindset of the country which has to change. That there are people who have differential growth, there are people who have differential skills, not everybody is same, there is a job opportunity, there is a entrepreneurship, there is a skill set. Luckily, even if the schools do not train it, kids rebel, and I think they become filmmakers and painters, they are all stories of rebel. I am not saying that one should not follow the school system, but if some kid is finding it difficulty, he should not be brought down to a lower pedestal of living. That is the first mindset, that unconditional love is the right of a kid. A right to, as right to education is the right, a right to secure living is also a right. So, parents should understand that instead of pressurizing the kid to get more and more marks and more without understanding the capability, they should divert his energy to more constructive and creative things, because if you do not, then see, a kid is not able to perform well in the studies, he gets rebuked, he gets insulted in front of peer groups all the time. Love is given on a condition that he will get a report card in the family, and this kid keeps taking this stress as he grows up independent, as he will become adolescent and his mind will rebel, as I talked about in generational conflict lecture. He will rebel, and he will split away from the parents, and he will try to find out some options outside, and then he will become antisocial, aggressive, get into alcohol. Very few of the people are able to direct their inner anxieties, inner stress into creative tasks, very few, because that is a training. The question is whether our schools, our parents, our educational system and the whole country as a whole trains people to divert their anxieties to creative pursuits. Or alternatively, most of the kids which we see as adults have huge anxiety which is coming from childhood, which is very well established now. You call it nurture, you call it epigenetics, you call it synaptic modeling or plasticity, but the fact of the matter is that most of the people, and they can go back to the childhood and really recall the type of insults which they have suffered in the classroom. So, this general change in attitude will do two or three things. One, it will increase interest in studies or extracurricular, better self esteem, better social behavior, healthy individual. Last three are a prerequisite of anybody for becoming a good human being and a good citizen. In whatever you are doing, you still have to be a good person. It is not, and I am sure we all will agree that being a PhD or being a topper does not make you a good individual. You can be a good individual maybe just selling some vegetables or being a waiter. It is about the dignity of labor, which unfortunately lacks in most people, which has to be, unless that is cultivated, this will become difficult. Now, it comes to about improved academic performance and interest in studies. This is a concept was given by Howard Gardner. It is no more valid scientifically, but still it is worth talking about. People have different type of intelligences. When I am saying this, I am not saying that there are blocks of intelligences. Intelligence is like a emergent property of lot of multitasking processes and skills, but one of them may get better developed than others. Some people are good with words, some people with numbers, people who study mathematics, they are better with numbers. Some people who talk, politicians are so good with words, pictures, music, we know all this. Some people are naturally intelligent. So, what are we trying to do? We are trying to change this pressured situation from the kid, making him acceptable to most people, focusing on his skill set, trying to consolidate it and helping him with his problem, which is the process of remediation. Now, how do we do remediation? What we do is, once we know the basic process of difficulty in reading and writing, two things. One, remediation actually in the basic process itself tries to treat the milder thing by practicing, and on a larger scale bypassing this route of learning. So, you can learn listening orally. When there was no writing, India was very famous for Shruti. Most of the learning was by hearing. So, if a kid is good, it is about knowledge. See, the problem is the kid may have a knowledge by hearing verbally, and if you ask him orally, he will tell you everything, but the system wants you to write. You are not able to write because visual interpretation is not there. So, you have to check whether you want to test the knowledge or writing skills. It will be very unfair that somebody is weak in writing. So, the board has changed this. all the board exams have facility for these kids to have a writer, amanuensis what they call. You can dictate, the other person can write, or give 1 hour extra for the slow writers, so that they get time. Now, how do you bypass? Imagine some kid who is doing a cursive writing. You all know cursive writing? We all taught in those lines, we make beautiful words. Now, this cursive writing becomes a problem for some kids. You change it to manuscript, the way you type, the way it is written here. See, it is all separate words. Some kids will just get help by writing a manuscript. Some kids will help by increasing the font. Some kids will just get helped if the volume on which they are assessed is decreased, meaning that if 5 pages are to be assessed in a unit test, and this kid is told that okay fine, you just read 3 pages, volume will reduce, he will be able to write that. Now, the other ways, there is something called air writing, where kids can just once they read the word, they overwrite on the word, they just overwrite on this. See, I am overwriting. Okay, you can see this, right? I am overwriting, or let me write any word. Once I overwrite this, then what I do is do air practice. If I write it in the air, the same word mi, or I write it mi, now my visual pathway is bypassed. So, I am hearing mi and my skin has taken this tactile sensation, and then when I will write mi, I will be able to write mi. This is bypassing the root. These are the techniques which people who do remediation use, and of course, hard work cannot be denied, practice, unconditional love, giving validity to the person is important, and this all helps, because if they, even if they do not become PhDs, they are able to find out their niche and survive, and that is the ultimate optimal independent living. So, I will just stop at this. I think it gives you a fair idea of what it is all about. So, that brings us to almost the end of the last week's lecture. We still have time, and I would wish that as you have gone through these courses, I have reserved the last 1 hour for you, and I wish that you write me problems, pick up cases from in and around your life, post it on forum, and so at the end, before we end this course, we will give 1 hour and try to give that time to picking up those problems and discussing it from the angle of psychiatry and mental health. Thank you.